Thornton Bray wiped the sweat from his brow as he led his horse, Whisperfoot, into the auction grounds. The morning sun beat down on his weathered face, highlighting the lines that told the story of 30 years working the land. His farm, once prosperous, had fallen on hard times after 3 consecutive seasons of drought had ravaged his crops. Now, he needed money for seed, and selling his best horse seemed the only option. The Willow Creek auction was bustling with activity. Wealthy buyers from neighboring counties had arrived in polished carriages and automobiles, their fine clothes contrasting sharply with Thornton's patched overalls. The farmer felt out of place among the aristocrats and businessmen who dominated the event. Whisperfoot was a plain-looking bay gelding with no distinctive markings save for a small white spot on his forehead. He wasn't a thoroughbred or a flashy show horse, just a sturdy farm animal with an unremarkable lineage. What no one knew, however, was that Whisperfoot had incredible speed and endurance. Thornton had discovered this by accident when chasing down a runaway calf one day, but he'd kept it to himself, using the horse primarily for farm work. As Thornton led Whisperfoot to the holding area, he noticed Evanston Blackwood, the region's wealthiest landowner. Blackwood was showing off his new acquisition, a gleaming black stallion named Midnight Tempest, imported from overseas at great expense. The millionaire was surrounded by admirers, boasting about his horse's prestigious bloodline and racing potential. "This magnificent creature will sweep the circuit this season," Blackwood proclaimed, his voice carrying across the yard. "There isn't a horse within 3 counties that could hope to match his speed." Thornton merely shook his head and continued walking. He had no interest in racing or showing off. He just needed enough money to keep his farm operational for another season. When Whisperfoot's turn came at auction, the crowd's enthusiasm waned. After the excitement of several prize-winning breeds being sold, a plain farm horse held little appeal. The auctioneer struggled to generate interest. Starting bid at $50 for this, a sturdy working animal, he announced with noticeably less enthusiasm than he'd shown for previous lots. The bidding was sparse and unenthusiastic. Thornton's heart sank as he watched his horse, a horse he knew was special, being dismissed as ordinary. Just as the auctioneer was about to close the bidding at a dismally low price, a voice called out from the back of the crowd. $75. Heads turned to see who had spoken. A woman in her late 40s stood confidently, her clothes modest but well-maintained. This was Octavia Merritt, owner of the small inn at the edge of town. She wasn't wealthy by the standards of most auction attendees, but she was shrewd and respected. Octavia caught Thornton's eye and gave him a small nod. They had known each other for years. She had been kind to him after his wife's passing, occasionally sending food to his farm when times were hardest. The auctioneer, surprised by the bid, quickly recovered. "I have 75. Do I hear 80? The crowd remained silent. Most were already discussing the next lot, a gleaming chestnut mare with impressive conformation. "Sold to Ms. Merritt for $75, the auctioneer announced, banging his gavel with finality. As Thornton watched Whisperfoot being led away, he felt a mixture of relief and sadness. At least his horse would be well treated by Octavia, but he couldn't help feeling that he'd just parted with something truly special for far less than its worth. Octavia Merritt had her reasons for purchasing Whisperfoot. Unlike the wealthy buyers who sought status symbols, she needed a reliable horse to help with deliveries and transportation for her inn, the Wayfarer's Rest. The modest establishment sat at the crossroads connecting 4 counties, making it a popular stop for travelers. After bringing Whisperfoot to her stable, Octavia noticed something remarkable about the horse. Despite his ordinary appearance, he moved with an unusual grace and seemed to possess abundant energy. The stable boy, young Garrick, quickly formed a bond with the animal. "He's special, Ms. Merritt," Garrick insisted one morning after exercising the horse. "I've never seen anything like it. When I let him run, it's like he barely touches the ground." Octavia nodded thoughtfully. Thornton Bray wouldn't have parted with him if times weren't so hard. "I always suspected that man underplayed his treasures." Summer arrived, bringing with it the annual Willow Creek Festival. The highlight of the 3-day celebration was the horse race, which attracted competitors from throughout the region. The purse wasn't substantial, but the prestige was significant, especially among the area's elite. Evanston Blackwood had made it known that his stallion, Midnight Tempest, would be competing. The millionaire had spared no expense in hiring a professional jockey and had been boasting about his impending victory for weeks. "This year's race is merely a formality," he declared during a dinner at the mayor's residence. "I've seen the competition, and frankly, it's hardly worth saddling Tempest for such an easy win." Word of these boasts reached Octavia as she served drinks to festival planners meeting at her inn. Her eyes narrowed as she listened to Blackwood's arrogance being recounted. "The man needs a lesson in humility," she muttered to herself. The following day, Octavia approached Garrick with an unusual proposition. "How would you feel about riding Whisperfoot in the festival race?" The boy's eyes widened. "Against Midnight Tempest? But Ms. Merritt, everyone would laugh at us. Whisperfoot is just a farm horse." "Is he?" Octavia challenged. "Or is he something more that others have failed to recognize?" After some persuasion, Garrick agreed. They began training secretly in the early mornings and evenings, using the meadow behind the inn. With each session, Octavia's suspicions were confirmed. Whisperfoot possessed extraordinary speed. 2 days before the festival, Thornton Bray stopped by the inn for supplies. When he saw Whisperfoot in the stable, the horse nickered in recognition. "He looks good," Thornton commented, stroking the horse's neck. "Better than he did at my place, I'd wager." Octavia studied the farmer's weather-beaten face. "Thornton, this horse of yours, did you ever race him?" The farmer looked away. "No need for racing on a farm." "But you knew he was fast, didn't you?" A smile crept across Thornton's face. "Let's just say there wasn't a stray cow on my property that Whisperfoot couldn't run down." Octavia leaned closer. "We're entering him in the festival race, against Blackwood's prized stallion." Thornton raised his eyebrows in surprise, then chuckled. "Now that I'd like to see. Would you like to see more than that?" Octavia asked with a gleam in her eye. "How about we make things interesting for Mr. Blackwood?" The first day of the Willow Creek Festival arrived with perfect weather. The town square was transformed with colorful banners, vendor stalls, and musicians playing lively tunes. Children ran about with candied apples and ribbons, while adults gathered in clusters to discuss the upcoming events. The horse race, scheduled for the festival's final day, was the main topic of conversation. Evanston Blackwood had established himself at the center of attention, holding court near the refreshment tent. His stallion, Midnight Tempest, was stationed nearby in a temporary paddock, drawing admiring glances from passers-by. "Magnificent animal," remarked Magistrate Holloway, the town's most prominent official. "I've never seen such conformation in these parts." "Imported from the finest stables in Europe," Blackwood replied smugly. "Cost more than most men earn in 5 years, but then again, excellence has its price." Octavia and Garrick entered the festival grounds leading Whisperfoot. The plain bay horse attracted little attention compared to the other contenders being paraded around. Most were well-bred racing stock owned by wealthy landowners who competed in regional races throughout the year. Octavia approached the registration table to enter Whisperfoot in the race. The clerk looked up from his ledger with a skeptical expression. "This is a serious competition, Ms. Merritt," he said, eyeing Whisperfoot doubtfully. "Perhaps you'd be better suited for the draft horse pulls or the agricultural exhibits." "I'm aware of what this competition entails," Octavia replied coolly. "Please register Whisperfoot for the main race. And Garrick here will be the jockey." The clerk shrugged and made the entry, though he couldn't resist a comment. "Your entry fee is as good as anyone else's, I suppose." As they walked away, Blackwood intercepted them, his eyes moving dismissively over Whisperfoot. "Octavia, surely you can't be serious about entering this animal in the race," he chuckled, loud enough for nearby festival goers to hear. "Why, it's practically an insult to the other competitors." Garrick's cheeks flushed with anger, but Octavia placed a restraining hand on his shoulder. "We're quite serious, Mr. Blackwood," she replied evenly. "In fact, I'm confident enough to propose a wager." Blackwood's eyebrows rose in amusement. "A wager? With what stakes, pray tell? You're little in against my estate, perhaps." He laughed heartily at his own joke. "Nothing so dramatic," Octavia responded. "If Whisperfoot beats your Midnight Tempest, You will donate funds sufficient to save Thornton Bray's farm, enough for new seed, equipment repairs, and hired help for a season. Blackwood's laughter faded slightly. And if my stallion wins, as he undoubtedly will, then the deed to Whisperfoot returns to you. You can sell him, work him, or turn him into glue, your choice. The millionaire considered the proposal, a calculating look crossing his features. It hardly seems fair. To you, that is. But I never turn down easy money. He extended his hand. You have a deal, Ms. Merritt. As they shook hands, Thornton Bray approached from the crowd, his expression troubled. Octavia, you shouldn't risk Whisperfoot on my account. It's not just about you, she replied quietly. It's about showing him that money isn't everything. She nodded toward Blackwood, who was already walking away, chuckling to himself. Throughout the festival's second day, word spread about the unusual wager. Most townsfolk considered it foolhardy on Octavia's part, though many secretly hoped for an upset. Thornton spent the day helping Garrick prepare, sharing his knowledge of Whisperfoot's habits and preferences. He doesn't like the crop, Thornton advised. Never needed it. Just give him his head when it's time to run, and he'll know what to do. As the sun set on the second day, Octavia stood at the edge of the racecourse, measuring the distance with her eyes. The track was a mile-long oval around the town's largest meadow. Tomorrow would determine whether her faith in an ordinary-looking farm horse had been misplaced. Dawn broke clear and bright on the final day of the festival. The race was scheduled for noon, and by mid-morning, spectators had begun claiming viewing positions along the track. Vendors did brisk business selling refreshments and small flags representing the different horse owners. In a makeshift stable area, Garrick carefully groomed Whisperfoot, his hands trembling slightly with anticipation. The boy, just 14, had never participated in a formal race before. The other jockeys, professional riders hired by wealthy owners, cast dismissive glances their way. Remember, Thornton said, helping adjust Whisperfoot's simple tack, he doesn't show his full speed right away. Let him settle into his rhythm first. Octavia watched from a respectful distance, allowing the bond between horse, rider, and former owner to strengthen. She had wagered much on this race, perhaps too much, but something in her gut told her it was the right decision. Across the preparation area, Blackwood's professional jockey, a man named Devlin Forge, was receiving final instructions. Forge had a reputation for aggressive riding and occasional unsportsmanlike conduct, but his results were undeniable. Don't just win, Blackwood instructed him. Humiliate them. I want everyone to remember what happens when amateurs challenge professionals. As noon approached, the competitors made their way to the starting line. 8 horses in total would race, though most spectators only had eyes for Midnight Tempest. The black stallion pranced nervously, his coat gleaming in the sunlight, a stark contrast to Whisperfoot's workmanlike demeanor. Mayor Fitzgerald stepped forward to address the crowd. Welcome to the 35th annual Willow Creek Festival Race. Today's competitors represent the finest horseflesh in our region, and we're in for a spectacular show of speed and skill. The crowd cheered enthusiastically. Blackwood stood among a group of admirers, accepting congratulations for his victory before the race had even begun. Riders, take your positions, called the starter. Garrick guided Whisperfoot to his assigned position, the outside lane. The bay horse seemed calm despite the commotion, his ears flicking occasionally as he assessed the situation. Nervous? Asked Forge from atop Midnight Tempest, his voice mocking. No, sir, Garrick replied simply. The starter raised his pistol. On your mark. A hush fell over the crowd. Get set. Horses and riders tensed in anticipation. The pistol fired with a sharp crack, and the horses exploded from the starting line. As expected, Midnight Tempest shot to an early lead, his powerful strides eating up the track. Whisperfoot, by contrast, started somewhat slowly, finding his footing and rhythm. By the quarter-mile mark, Midnight Tempest led by nearly 4 lengths, with Whisperfoot running in 6th position. Blackwood smirked at Octavia across the viewing area. You might as well concede now and save your horse the exhaustion, he called out. Octavia said nothing, her eyes fixed on Garrick and Whisperfoot. The boy was riding exactly as instructed, allowing the horse to find his own pace. As they approached the halfway point, something remarkable began to happen. Whisperfoot started closing the gap, passing the fifth-place horse, then the fourth. "He's moving up," someone in the crowd shouted. Indeed, Whisperfoot was accelerating while the other horses were beginning to show signs of fatigue. By the three-quarter mark, he had moved into second place, though still 3 lengths behind Midnight Tempest. The crowd's energy shifted, their cheers now divided between the favorite and the underdog. Thornton clutched the fence railing, his knuckles white with tension. Octavia stood perfectly still, barely breathing. As they rounded the final turn, Whisperfoot continued to gain ground. Forge, sensing the threat, applied his crop to Midnight Tempest's flank repeatedly, urging more speed from the stallion. But something unexpected was happening. Whisperfoot seemed to be running with joy, his stride lengthening effortlessly as he closed the gap. The final furlong of the race unfolded in what seemed like slow motion to the spellbound crowd. Whisperfoot had closed to within a length of Midnight Tempest, and was gaining with every stride. Forge, increasingly desperate, struck his mount repeatedly with a crop while throwing glances over his shoulder at the approaching farm horse. Garrick, by contrast, simply leaned forward and whispered into Whisperfoot's ear. What he said, no one would ever know, but the effect was immediate. Whisperfoot surged forward with a burst of speed that seemed impossible for a horse that had been pulling plows just months earlier. "Look at that!" exclaimed Mayor Fitzgerald, abandoning his official impartiality. "I've never seen anything like it." With 20 yards to go, Whisperfoot drew even with Midnight Tempest. Forge, in a moment of panic, swerved his horse slightly to block Whisperfoot's path. The crowd gasped at the blatant violation of racing rules, but Whisperfoot, guided by Garrick's steady hands, simply adjusted his course and continued his relentless advance. They crossed the finish line with Whisperfoot a full head in front of Midnight Tempest. The crowd erupted, their cheers echoing across the meadow. Those who had wagered on the favorite groaned in disbelief, while townsfolk who had hoped for an upset celebrated wildly. Thornton Bray stood motionless, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. Octavia approached him, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "He was always special," Thornton said quietly. "I just never had the chance to show it." Across the track, Blackwood was arguing furiously with race officials, claiming interference and demanding a disqualification. But multiple witnesses, including Magistrate Holloway, had seen Forge's blocking attempt, not any misconduct by Garrick. "The results stand," announced the head official. "First place goes to Whisperfoot, owned by Octavia Merritt and ridden by Garrick Thatcher." The celebration continued as Garrick rode a triumphant Whisperfoot back to the viewing area. The horse carried himself with newfound pride, as if aware of his accomplishment. Children reached out to touch him as he passed, no longer overlooking the plain bay horse in favor of flashier animals. Blackwood, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment, eventually approached Octavia. "This was some kind of trick," he hissed. "That's no ordinary farm horse." "You're right," Octavia replied calmly. "He's extraordinary. But not because of his bloodline or his price tag, because of his heart. Something money can't buy, Mr. Blackwood." With great reluctance, Blackwood instructed his accountant to arrange the transfer of funds to save Thornton's farm, as per their wager. The amount was substantial but hardly noticed by a man of his wealth, though the blow to his pride would linger far longer than the financial loss. In the weeks that followed, Thornton's farm underwent a transformation. With proper funds for seed, equipment repairs, and hired help, the property began to thrive once more. Whisperfoot returned to the farm, not as a work animal, but as a treasured companion who divided his time between Thornton's farm and Octavia's inn. Garrick continued to ride him, and together they entered and won several regional races, building a reputation that spread beyond their small community. Whisperfoot's success story became legendary in the county, a reminder that value isn't always visible at first glance. For Evanston Blackwood, the experience proved transformative as well. The public humbling softened his arrogance, and over time, he developed a genuine appreciation for horsemanship rather than merely the status horses could provide. He eventually became one of the region's most respected breeders, valuing character and heart in his animals above flashy appearances. On quiet evenings, Thornton, Octavia, and Garrick would often sit on the farmhouse porch, watching Whisperfoot graze contentedly in the pasture. The horse that had once been overlooked at auction had changed all their lives, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary qualities lie beneath the most ordinary appearances, waiting for someone with the wisdom to recognize their true value. Some treasures, Octavia would say, are hidden in plain sight. You just need to know how to see them.